Rutgers rant. And fellas, I've got a feeling that rant is going to be the right word today. James Kratz, Keith Sargent, back as always. It has been a 48-hour period unlike anything that I have experienced covering Rutgers football. I don't want to go too far, but it's been about as crazy as any 48-hour period that I can remember doing this job for 20 years. If you've been living in a cave, Greg Schiano, no longer a candidate, at least we think, no longer a candidate for the Rutgers coaching vacancy after what can only be described as a stunning turn of events. Sorry, let's just start here. And I think there is a great deal of confusion about just what happened. And I say that because I think I'm a little confused at just what happened. I mean, give me your sense. I know it could take you 5 minutes to explain the whole thing, but just in like the last 48 hours, this was a job that was his, and then he doesn't have it. What happened?
So November 5th, they meet in Columbus, well documented. I think at that point they discussed every key facet, whether it was facilities, whether it was coaching staff, salary, all that type of stuff. The framework was both sides agreed to it. I think both sides came out of it thinking, okay, this is going to be the guy. There was some serious momentum. So no offer was ever made, but everyone knew at that point. Everything that we have discussed about Pat Hobbs, not wanting Schiano early on. I think at that point, both Greg and to be honest, Greg Schiano may be being reluctant to work for Pat Hobbs. All that stuff was calmed at that point. I think both understood that they could work together, so that was good. Flash forward to last week. Greg's side put together a term sheet of after it was basically agreed upon. Rutgers had offered 6 years, $4 million annually, $24 million guaranteed. Schiano's side came back, asked for 8 years, and basically the whole thing guaranteed at $4 million a pop. Coaching salary $7.7 million. And then the thing that spooked Rutgers, by all accounts, Rutgers officials were spooked away by two things. One, the addition of the private jet clause, and then two, the opt out if the facility and Greg Schiano wanted a completely new tear down the Hale Center, a completely new football building and a field house. If that wasn't done by at least started by January of 2022 or finished by the summer of 2023. Then Schiano could have an out in his contract. So those two things spooked Rutgers. My understanding is he never came back with a counter. Basically, from there, they started working on a plan B. There wasn't enough board support, sensing that Rutgers was turned off by the proposal. I think Greg Schiano acquiesced and maybe relented on a couple of those key demands late last week. Rutgers never they essentially broke off talks. I would say would be accurate late in the week, sensing that there was a plan B on Sunday morning. I think Greg Schiano just knew that that Rutgers had moved on. They weren't talking to him at that point, and he pulled out. He withdrew, and that's where we're at.
Incredible. All right, I want to go through these things one by one because it amazes me that a deal like this that both sides had absolute reason to have this happen, that it wouldn't happen. I guess, Crash, that's what I come back to. It's like you get to this point where they need each other. We know they need each other. The private jet thing. I mean, every coach uses it, can be negotiated. It doesn't have to be unlimited. I mean, I don't think that was what Shannon was saying was, I want to fly my kids here on Sunday at Seaside Heights. The opt-out part, I mean, I think that was a bigger sticking point by a lot of things that I heard. Would that have scared you if you were the AD? The fact that he would have said, "Look, we can't get this building done. I want to leave without any penalty." I mean, I don't know why that was as big a sticking point as everyone says. What do you think, Cratch? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't really understand that. The one thing I guess would scare me was how quick it was in the deal. Because the way I look at it is, one of two things is going to happen if Greg Schiano was hired as the Rutgers coach. Either the team was going to take off again or start to drastically improve, and everybody was going to be fired up and all the money was going to be flowing in and the facilities would happen, or Greg was going to struggle to get this thing off the ground. And by the time that clause kicked around, Greg was probably thinking, I want to extricate myself from this situation. And Rutgers might be thinking, we might need to do something different, but we don't want to fire Greg. So it just seemed like, I guess, 2022 is pretty early in the process.
Is it that or was it 2023? I think
it was, Sarge, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was either like shovels in the ground by 2022 or the place is built and ready to move in by 2023.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Okay.
Now, maybe if they said shovels in the ground 23, ready to build 24, ready to move in 24, I think at that point, I mean, if Greg's putting that in, if Greg is putting that in, if it's not done, he probably is looking elsewhere. And my whole thought process would be, if it's not done, it's probably because we haven't won enough. So at this point, it almost kind of protects both sides in a backdoor way, protects Rutgers to get out of the deal.
So, I absolutely agree.
So a couple things. One, Pat Hobbs has been, he's talked publicly about the need for a field house. They were planning on doing a field house. A news alert. They actually are planning a master plan on the next phase, and the next phase is going to include a field house. They started doing it in October. They have an RFP out to get some consulting on that. So there's your news for the podcast. They are full steam ahead on a field house. Where I guess the argument came was, Greg's side said that the Hale Center is falling apart. The coach's office, yes, they just sunk in $4 million into the locker rooms, and the locker rooms are, by all accounts, are really nice. And Pat Hobbs wants to turn the equipment room into basically a really interactive player lounge that's going to be good for recruiting. All that stuff is good, but Greg Schiano wanted basically a brand new facility. The total cost for a new facility, for a field house, for renovations that need to be done inside the football stadium was $150 million. $150 million is what Rutgers officials had estimated at. No one knew how they were going to pay for it. Keep in mind, you're talking about a school that has just completed $115 million building for the RWJ Barnabas APC, and then the Rodkins Center is $65 million. Both buildings are heavily financed with loans. It's no secret about that. A $26 million bond on RWJ, and then the other one is through a loan program as well. So there was no plan, no idea of how you're going to pay for $150 million by 2023. And quite frankly, they thought that, well, if the fundraising is going to be contingent on winning, and the program is going to struggle for the next 3 years, it's going to be awfully tough to fundraise. So there was some arguments, some contentious back and forth on exactly what to do from a facility standpoint. Rutgers officials will now continue to say that their plan is a new field house and an upgrade on the Hale Center. That's been Pat Hobbs' plan all along. I expect that to continue, and I guess that was probably one of the sticking points that ultimately led it to break off.
This is fascinating to me. So I think I would be, I would disagree, but I think there would be some understanding in the fan base if they outlined, hey, look, we just couldn't afford this. And maybe that people might not be able to swallow it, but people might have at least said, all right, well,
I agree.
Okay, you get it. This is what bothers me. The two things that bother me are, one, you mean to tell me you're not going to take this counteroffer from Greg Schiano to the board of governors, to the people that matter, and say, okay, what do you I mean, you're going to let it die there on Pat Hobbs, on an AD who didn't want to hire the guy in the first place, on a guy who fought this every step of the way, on a guy who had the Toledo coach on his original coaching list, but not Greg Schiano. You're going to let, number one, so you're going to let that happen. And just beyond that, when the deal does die, 10 minutes later, I'm reading a story that Greg Schiano wasn't committed. Like anonymous quotes that are, I mean, I don't have to tell you guys. I won't spell it out for you. If you can't figure out where the anonymous quotes came from, you probably, you're not going to win in the in scavenger hunts. But just the idea that now we're going to rip Greg Schiano behind his back, that he wasn't all in for the job, that he wasn't committed to it, that he was old news, that he wasn't, I mean, it's just that whole thing to me, how this went down to me is what created the anger.
So let me add something there, okay? So there was a feeling amongst people who talked to Greg early, and that Greg was, I guess, a little suspect, as anyone else would be. Like, imagine you're interviewing for a job, and you think that there might be a different thing, and it's going back to the place where you have questions. So early on, I don't think there's any doubt. We're talking about probably about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, where Greg was a little leery and wasn't signaling that he would accept the job early on.
Right.
But for the last 2 weeks, anyone in that Greg Schiano circle will tell you, anyone who talked to him, anyone who's close to him will tell you stories about how he was working 15 hours a day, doing transfer portal stuff, lining up recruits, lining up coaching staff, getting firm commitments, talking to architects.
Recruiting schedule for after the press conference.
That narrative, right. Again, we're talking a couple weeks ago, he might have been leery. Leery working with Pat Hobbs, leery with, going back to a place with a president, with uncertainty, as far as who's going to be the next president, facility stuff, all that stuff, he might have been leery about, talking to people who were close to him. In the last 2 weeks, he was all in. I have no problem saying that. Anyone close to him who's talked to him and knows what how involved he's been in the last couple of weeks would tell you that. So, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right. Absolutely. All right.
I just
go ahead, Chris.
Want to add something. Go back to the health center. I think that a broader picture, there are a lot of people at Rutgers who I think until they sat down with Greg and Greg made it demand, never thought that there was anything wrong
Greg Brown's one of them, I bet. Absolutely. Yeah. He put $4 million in his locker room. Now Shannon's telling
I think a lot of people thought that, hey, we're moving, the lacrosse and the soccer programs into the Rutgers Center. I don't know where the women's tennis program is going, but I think they're going to have a new home, and it was going to be football only. And I think Greg kind of as Sarge said, they've been planning a field house, planning phase 2. I always think they wanted to, renovate, the Hale Center and improve it. But it never dawned on them that anything was wrong with the Hale Center. And then when Greg said that, I think it just shook a lot of people. And I asked 3 different college coaches who have, been at Rutgers, work at Rutgers, currently, have been through the building. I said, is Greg wrong about this? All 3 of them said, absolutely not.
Of course, Chris Ash was saying it, though. How could they not know it?
Then they said Rutgers might not be able to pay for it, but they said there was absolutely nothing irrational or ridiculous about Greg saying, I want a new building, because, and I think I forget, it was on Twitter or I want that's what, someone, like the Hale Center basically looks the same from the outside as it did, when, there were no stands at the stadium. So I think that was something that even beyond Greg, I just think that was kind of like maybe a jarring experience for Rutgers. They've done all this work with all those facilities, and then Greg was just like, "No, guys, this is not what we need."
Right.
So
all right, so let's get the point now is, can they save it? And I admire people who behind the scenes like Ryan Hart, and from what we understand, Senator Cody, former Governor Cody, who are trying to get these people back to the table. I do wonder, Sarge, it seems like it is to me at least far less likely to happen at this point, based on the fact that you've got a president who's on his way out, who just is not going to, just have no intention of making a move on Pat Hobbs, which I think we all agree is what has to happen in some level for this reunion with Schiano to happen now. And B, you've got a governor in Phil Murphy who doesn't want the fight. So am I wrong, Sarge? You think in that am I missing something? Is there something that can happen in the next 24, 48 hours before Thanksgiving and before they have their next guy that can change this?
Look, I'll say 3 facts that I know. One, I think from the Schiano camp, I think they would be happy to come back to the table. I will say with almost near certainty that they will not work with Pat Hobbs, and then I'll say, and I've said this a lot on the podcast over the years, dating back, to, and talked on videos and said it. The idea that the Board of Governors or Senator or Governor Murphy or anyone else is going to get Pat Hobbs fired, that's not the way it works. The Board of Governors appoints the president. The president hires and fires the AD. That's the way it works. So the idea that Mark Engelson, the chair of the Board of Governors, or anyone else on the 14-person Board of Governors is going to fire Pat Hobbs based on a revolt, it's just not happening. The president hires and fires the AD. He has already fired 2 ADs. He's not doing a third one. He's not doing a third one. If anything, he's probably going to just let the next president deal with it. And right now, Pat Hobbs has President Barchi's 100% support. So you add those two things together, and it looks to be dead. Because again, I don't think the Schiano camp wants any part of going there and working for Pat. And President Barchi is not making a move on Pat Hobbs.
Right. All right. So, Cratch, anything you agree with that? Do you think, from what you've seen, tea leaves, do you think this is possible?
I mean, I guess at this point, Rutgers continues to amaze me. So you never know.
We thought we would be here in the first place. Yeah.
But I mean, no. I mean, and especially not when all indications are. I've heard I think Rutgers in a perfect world, they want to hire someone they want to have someone locked in Sunday right after the Penn State game, and I guess call the board meeting then or Monday and have a press conference Wednesday and get everybody on their commercial flights to go recruit. So I don't at that point too, I mean, I especially don't think, if Pitt beats BC and Steve Addazio gets thrown out. Greg, that's what I'm saying. Greg, Greg might have options also. I also think there's a possibility that, who knows? Greg could get off of the BC job. Greg could emerge elsewhere. I mean, and let me tell you something. I talk to people. No matter who Rutgers hires, the idea of Greg Schiano being at Boston College has to terrify everyone at Rutgers, because you thought Steve Addazio recruited New Jersey well.
Yeah.
Wait till Greg is landing a private chopper on the fields of Bergen County parochial schools.
Angry Greg Schiano, no less. Not just Greg.
Angry Greg Schiano. Greg Schiano. With Rutgers coming up on the schedule in a couple of years.
Boy.
So that's the thing, also another thing too is that I've been told by a lot of people, Greg's relationship with Bill Belichick is strong.
Yeah.
When Bill Belichick spoke highly of Greg when he left the Patriots in that statement, apparently that was the real McCoy. They're good.
Interesting.
So Greg could always go back to the Patriots too.
Oh boy.
Now your daughter's another year closer. Obviously, everyone knows that. Being closer to graduating high school. So yeah, I just think that I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, it could happen, but as Sarge said, I just don't see how I don't see how the puzzle pieces fit to make it happen.
You had a fascinating scoop today here, Cratch, that I think, to me, it is the one scenario. And I woke up this morning thinking, no one's going to take this job. And that's going to be what's going to happen. It's going to be eventually they're going to have to go crawling back to Schiano because they're not going to have anybody willing to do it. But if the name Jeff Hafley is not familiar to people around Rutgers or casual fans, it should be. He's the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. He's a guy who worked here, I think, for a year under Greg, and then went to Pittsburgh and recruited the hell out of the state. Followed Greg to, am I getting this right? Followed Greg to the Buccaneers. He's been he's been a pro assistant. He's kind of like that PJ Fleck dude. I mean, Cratch, do you think it's real that he could be a guy who wants this job? Because that's what I don't understand. If he's making $1 million, he's the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. They might win the national championship. He's going to have better opportunities. Why the hell would he come here? Is it as simple as 6 years, $24 million?
I mean, it could be that simple. I look. He's someone I know Rutgers is obviously interested in. And I think, I've heard a lot of fans say, well, what happened? Because obviously we reported Anthony Campanelli earlier, a couple days before this even broke apart. We reported that on Sunday morning. I think what I come back to is this. I do not think it was a coincidence that we went, they fired Ash in late September, and it was kind of a month where nothing happened. And all of a sudden, November begins, and they interview Butch, and then they interviewed Greg, and basically offered Greg the job. And then we had this 3-week process that fell apart. My opinion is that the search firm probably came back to Pat Hobbs and Greg Brown and said, guys, like, no one really wants this.
Yeah.
You know, sitting head coaches don't want, and I think another thing hurt them too is that Joe Moorhead, Jason Candle, Lance Leopold, all these guys, one, went over like a hot fart with the fan base, and two, they're 500, you know? Like Jason Candle won the MAC and was his offensive genius, and he's like under 500 the last 2 seasons. You know, or it's like a game over 500. You know, Joe Moorhead might get fired if he loses the Egg Bowl to Ole Miss. So I think that's the issue. So now they have to kind of go back to these hot coordinators who have ties to the area. And look, I think the one thing I will say about, everyone says, oh, Jeff Hafley will have better options. You think that, but sometimes your window closes on you, and there's not going to be a lot of blue blood jobs opening. Jeff Hafley's not going to get USC. Michigan State, even if Michigan State opens, they can get a guy like Fickle or Narduzzi. So
you
Jeff
can't wait 20 minutes, though? I mean, you wait a year.
but here's the thing. I mean, look at Greg. What does everyone say about Greg? Ohio State's defense was
Greg had the Tennessee job until they went crazy, though.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, Greg took the Tennessee job. They went crazy. He went back to Ohio State. Their defense was horrible, and everyone now rips Greg for having a bad defense at Ohio State in his last year.
I'll say this.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'll say this to Cratchit's point is Chris Ash spent his whole life building up to that moment where, he has an option between Rutgers, Syracuse was on the table. He wanted to be a Big Ten coach. He had the pedigree. He had won a national championship as a co-defensive coordinator. He was at Wisconsin, had a lot of success, and then he chose Rutgers. And people who are close to Chris Ash will say that was career suicide. He'll never, and that's your one opportunity. So Jeff Hafley has to think about that. Like, I mean, there are people who know that guy who will say, like, and I said this 2 weeks ago on the podcast when this question came up. I said the same thing I'll say that I'm going to say now. There are people who think that he's going to be a rock star. The guy is going to be really, really good. PJ Fleck level, maybe even higher. That guy, he's going to be really good, inspiring. He's going to win the press conference. He's going to, inspire the donors and that sort of thing. So he has to consider that. I mean, Cratch is right. There might not be, Florida State, is not going to hire him. He's right. And look, he's a Jersey guy, so maybe this would appeal to him. But he does have to consider that. And it sounds terrible, but Rutgers is a career killer.
Yeah.
Another thing too I would add is, everyone has ego. Most coaches probably think I can turn this around. I think Chris Ash, talking to people who knew Chris Ash, I mean, when Chris Ash got to Rutgers, I think he thought it was going to be bing, bang, boom. We're going to go win 10 games in 3 years. He is. So I could see a guy being like, I can do this. I mean, we'll see if they can, but
They have new information though, and it's clearly that it's not going to be a 3-year thing. If it's all right, so in the Hafley, if it's not, let's just say that he comes to his senses. What do they do next? Anthony Campini, I get it. Everyone loves, he might be a coach on the rise, but I mean, his resume is thinner than his brother's right now, who's running the team. I mean, I don't understand how that's a viable candidate. What else are we looking at here? I mean, what do you think?
I think every indication I've gotten is that it's not, Nunzio's not a candidate. He told me yesterday that no one said anything about interviewing with him. Obviously, I think at this point, if they were going to interview him, even as a courtesy, it would be on the books. I don't think you could rule him out just because he's in the spot now, and sometimes inertia helps in that sense. He'd be like
the Trump cabinet. He'd be interim for the interim coach for next year. Keep going. No one else wants the job.
It sounds crazy, but actually, when Pete Rossamondo left Central Connecticut State, they made his top assistant the interim head coach, and that guy carried the interim tag into the regular season. And then basically, when he clinched the FCS playoff berth, they're like, "Okay, you can be the head coach now." So it's not like it's never happened anywhere. I mean, for Butch Jones, I don't think he's completely off the table. I don't think he's a focus. I think Butch Jones is just out there as like a last resort kind of hire for them potentially. But I think if it's not Anthony, if it's not Halfley, I know we've reported, Brett Bielema's been rumored on the radar. I don't. My whole thing is, if Brett Bielema was like a serious candidate, why wouldn't you have sprinted to him 2 months ago? I mean, the guy won 3 Big Ten titles. It doesn't really get much better than that in the Rutgers coaching search. But then I think you probably go back to guys like Leopold and maybe Joe Moorhead, even Chris Creighton, and those could be fine hires. But I just think at this point it's very tough for anybody not be named Greg Schiano to take the job. I think Halfley and Campanelli are they're at least people are not going to throw tomatoes at them at the press conference.
That's a good start, I guess.
Yeah, it's where to start.
Bar is on the ground.
And I do think that if they hire a guy like Halfley or Anthony Campanelli, at some point the temperature will go down and most people will just calm down. Greg's not coming and move forward.
Let's hope so. All right, so I'm going to dive into the Rutgers Insider questions. We'll just skip true or false this week. I don't have anything funny for that. As always, NJ.com /text. It was, quite a bloodbath of texts on Sunday. I think at one point I had 157 replies to one text about the channel thing. We try as best as we can to reply to as many as we can, but it was physically impossible. So right now, though, with the podcast, you guys sent some really great ones and most of the questions today revolve around Pat Hobbs. And I guess you're not surprised about this. The first one I got was Rose Bowl Pat expecting the blowback he received yesterday? I think we have to credit Bobby Darren from 24/7 Sports for coming up with Rose Bowl Pat. Very funny. But, what do you guys think? Were they caught off guard by this? Sarge, did you think that they underestimated the blowback they were going to get?
No, they were not. I was told by Rutgers officials that they saw this coming. A few other things that that we need to get out there too, because there was a feeling on Wednesday when 2 reporters from our outlet, news reporters, wrote a story in which a top advocacy group called out and called Rutgers not to hire Greg Schiano, that was going to impact it. It did not. I talked to people over at Old Queens who said that had no impact, to the point where they basically said, "Get over yourself, Star Ledger, NJ.com, that you're not taking up residence in our head." So that right there, just take that rumor out of the equation. Yeah,
You know who says something like that, Sarge? Someone who's got us in their heads. Sorry.
I guess that's fair, but yeah, I have nothing else to add. But that was out there for a while, and it just wasn't true.
I will say that, though, and Kratz, you were there, so you would know this, Bell. Someone put just on Twitter right now, it said that they likened what happened with the blowback over not hiring Schiano to the blowback over benching Eli. Mm-hmm. And because of the way it was handled, because it was handled so poorly, because of the emotion from Eli, and because of the fan base, the visceral reaction, that's the best way I can describe it. It was really sadness, anger, surprise. Do you agree?
I agree. I actually was thinking about that, though. I always thought that would be very difficult to defeat as the craziest thing I've kind of reported on a beat in my life. And less than 2 years later, we have blown past that point. This is wild. The one thing I always came back to, and when several players, Art Sikowski included, entered the transfer portal yesterday, probably more are coming. Someone at Rutgers, was basically someone said, people can say it's because of Schiano. And I don't think it's necessarily because of Schiano not being the coach. I think it's because I think people would have been able to handle, they would have been upset, but they would have been able to handle Greg not being the coach if it was a little bit cleaner of an execution. Like I said, Greg loves Rutgers. I think that's undisputed. So if they had said, okay, this is not going to work out, let's do a joint statement where we kind of say we talked, we respect each other, it's not the right time or fit, we move forward, Greg, this place is always special to me. Okay. People would have been like, all right, we don't like this, but we move on. But I think it was the fact that it was just kind of like this circus where people were saying this and that, and everything was all over the place that kind of created a sense of chaos that some people would just think that it was chaos. Yeah. It was chaos. But I think that kind of made people. So that's my guess, is that Rutgers knew people would be outcried, to be upset. But I think it just kind of became an inferno because of the way it all kind of came out at the end.
Another question, and a good one. How does Hobbs move forward after losing donors in the fan base? Seems like he needs to go to actually give the program a future. Tom from Lawrenceville diving in with that one. Sarge, I mean, it's extremely valid.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is he's going to hope that he nails the hire and that they show themselves. He knows. I mean, I think anyone close to Pat understands it's going to be a long process, and there's going to be a healing process. You have to keep in mind that so many of the big money people want a Greg Schiano back. It's going to be a healing process, but if he gets the hire right and within time, and look, if he, all of a sudden the new coach starts winning some recruiting battles and gaining some momentum, that'll be what heals him more than anything else. If he can hire the right guy, and that guy shows that he can win some recruiting battles and it goes in the next season with some momentum, that will be the ultimate thing that saves Pat Hobbs.
I guess it's just going to be so hard for that. I mean, even if you win, this class is almost toast at this point. You can win some this spring, but then you come into the season where Monmouth is going to come here and potentially.
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, Doug Dolan, who went on the record, give him a lot of credit because he's a very serious guy who's done a lot of good things for Rutgers. He even said that he wishes no ill will for whoever gets the job. And and I think deep down, he didn't say it, but I think deep down he's going to root for whoever. He's not going to pay for tickets. He's not going to support Rutgers. He went on record saying that he's not going to give Rutgers any more money. He's done. But I think deep down he'll still, he believes Rutgers and will root for him. So there will be a feeling amongst fans, amongst donors, let's move on. Let's support this guy, whoever it is. Those are two different things, because I think from a losing trust in faith in Pat Hobbs, he's going to need to repair that. I think the only way he can do that is by showing that, I got the hire right.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Is another one about Hobbs. Is it fair to say Hobbs never wanted Schiano and he used the institutional dysfunction and small thinking of Rutgers to kill the hiring? Good theory, certainly. Cratch, do you think that it was not just the fact that he didn't want it, but he knew enough about what was, what the processes, the people, the whole situation at Rutgers, where he could sabotage it without it. Are you gonna go that far?
I'm not going to go that far, but I will say that I don't think Pat was ever terribly enthused about the idea of hiring Greg Schiano.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty clear. And I do think there's some validity to the idea that, Rutgersness kind of created an environment where this could happen.
Right.
Rutgers is, do this, like as Sarge said, the AD, the president hires the AD, the board, at other schools, there would have been a palace coup and Greg would already be here.
Right. That's it. So true.
But Rutgers, the structure of Rutgers, and I think as time goes on, Rutgers probably one by one, you're kind of picking a brick off the infrastructure until at some point in the future, when we're well gone, that Rutgers might be Auburn.
Yeah.
But right now it's not. And I think that's kind of what allowed this to kind of break down this way. Because if it was like a lot of other schools where the big money can just kind of power over with what they want, I think we probably have a different outlook.
But it's not just the big money, though. This is what I love it, though. It is the point you just made is so relevant to this, because the football coach is as important as the president of the university as far as a hire, as far as visibility, as far as everything associated with it. And if you're going to get that wrong because you're going to let anybody get – if you decide that Greg Schiano is the answer and you have an AD that he doesn't want, you get rid of him. I mean, that's what other schools would do. And you write the check and you move on. But because it's Rutgers, that has a history. I could go through, the first time they want to hire Butch Jones, you can go through a million examples of this place making little, small, stupid decisions and missing the big picture. Sarge.
I'll give you this, okay? I had a donor, a booster, and we're talking about a really major level guy, like a Scarlet Society, $1 million lifetime guy, who told me probably about a week ago when you got a sense that things were dragging and that things could fall apart, teetering in it, so to speak. And there was a sense that Greg might have reservations about Pat. Pat might have reservations about Greg. You started hearing that late last week. He told me that it ultimately it was a choice between Pat Hobbs and Greg Schiano. Greg Schiano is going to win because that was the vibe. And this is a long time person who's given a ton of money, and that was a confidence level in so many people behind the scenes in that that they had come too far, and if it was a choice between if Pat was trying to sabotage it, which I'm not so sure he was. I've heard some things. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I'm not going to go there at this point. But the strong sense among the big money people was if it was a choice between Greg and Pat, Schiano was going to win.
Yep, and he didn't. So here we are. All right, here's another great. I thought this was a great question. How many season tickets have been canceled? How much in donation canceled? For me, it's 12 tickets and $2,000. Loyal 27-year season ticket holder. I'm done. And I thought that was just fascinating because, again, like I wrote the column today about people mourning. And I mean, I lost. I wish I had counted. I wish I had counted because people were sending me, I had 6 and I'm done with them. I had 4. I had 2. I'm not sure. Just so many different people had said this. I mean, Sarge, it's too early. I get it. But can you put a dollar figure on what the financial implications might be for this, keeping in mind that already you had a game that's against Michigan State, a Big Ten premier program that had 10,000 people in the building.
Yeah, I'll say this. Okay, there's a feeling amongst the big money people that they could lose as much as $50 million. $50 million. I'm not so sure about it because if you look at their fundraising, and give Pat credit for completing a $100 million campaign, but $25 million of it was tax credits, and then you're talking about like a major gift from RWJ, and then the idea that they've actually raised $50 million, it's been a long slog, and that's a huge number. So I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Here's what's important. Doug Dolan says, flat out said on the record that he's cutting Rutgers out of his will. We heard that. I don't know about if you heard that, but I know I heard that probably from about 6 or 7 people yesterday that they had planned to do it. We're talking about people who have accumulated a lot of wealth. That's the base of Rutgers' donor pool is, older folks who have started putting it in their will, that they're going to leave X amount, and it's a lot of money, right?
Right.
Keep in mind, when Bauer passed away a few years ago, that's what allowed them to complete the baseball softball facility. So we're talking about major gifts that get them over the hump sometimes that they're counting on, that they earmark. They say, okay, well, this money is going to come, whether it's 5 years down the line or whatever, but this money is guaranteed. If that money starts going away, that's a problem.
Can you imagine though if you're in this, your dad's dead and you're sitting there and going to the lawyer's office and he reads the will and he says, "I'm leaving all of my fame, my fortunes to Rutgers athletics." You'd be like, "Oh, Dad!" you'd be sitting there thinking, "Oh no, that was it. Now I can't send the kids to college." Anyway, all right, that's completely unrelated. Another question. How about discussing Steve Pikiell's inability? Wow, how about that? I'm just really shifting gears on you. Steve Pikiell's inability to recruit at this level. Bannon had Dante, Waters had Coleman and Doobie. He'll have Rosario and Rice, and that guard I can't remember. Jordan had Corey. This is interesting. I put this in here for a reason because I think people, are disappointed with some of the recent news with Steve Pikiell and recruiting, and based on the building they have now. Cratch, what do you think?
I think it's a valid argument. It's someone who really follows the program said the other day, it seems like we're getting to the point where we're going to have 12 glue guys on the bench.
Yeah.
So, and I will say this too, we talk about how Pat Hobbs moves forward. Basketball team winning games and not going down to the last possession with, America East programs would be a good place to start on the healing process too. And as we're taping this on Tuesday morning, they're going to play NJIT tonight at the Rack, and who knows what the fan base is going to look like in terms of their Schiano anger. But if the cherry on top of this is that NJIT, which those kids are going to be fired up.
Man,
if they come out here and upset Rutgers, which is, I think, 4-1 now, but it's been kind of a lackluster 4-1. I don't even want to think about what that would lead to. But no, I think it's a valid point. I think, look, I would say let Cliff Amarui commit to some school that's not Rutgers before you completely write Peichel off, because they seem to be kind of all in on his recruitment. Obviously, being a Roosevelt Catholic, and it seems like the kid is receptive enough. I mean, he visits campus relatively frequently. But no, I think it has to be a concern. Montez Mathis is a good player. Paul Mulcahy is a good player. Miles Johnson's a good player. But you're right. They don't necessarily have that kind of like transcendent, dominant player that Corey was, or other guys in the past coaches have led.
Yep. All right. Wait, one more question. This was a good one. Whoever sent this, I really appreciated. With Thanksgiving around the corner, what's your favorite variety of pie? And then he says, I can't take any more coaching drama this week. That is just beautiful. I got to tell you, I like it. I know this is a good question. I like a good chocolate chip pie. But is it more of a cookie? That's a really good question. Sarge, your favorite pie?
Pumpkin pie with whipped cream. I'm a traditional guy, and
you just want your basic Kratz. You got something interesting? Or what kind of pie you going to have?
I've always kind of lived by Garrison Keillor's comment that like pumpkin pie is kind of like a living symbol of mediocrity, because the best one you ever had isn't really that far off from the worst one you've ever had.
I love it.
I do like pumpkin pie. No, I like apple pie.
Apple pie?
I like German
pie. Can you get more conservative than apple pie? I mean,
really? Well, I'm not surprised at all.
Let me back out, okay?
Yeah.
Let me back out.
You're taking the Kentucky. Yeah, you're picking the Kentucky of pies here. It's just the most boring pick ever. Okay, that's fine.
No, a German apple pie is delicious.
You didn't even
German apple pie.
It's got a thick crust. It's basically like, imagine an apple pie, but like it's got like 8 sticks of butter to make the crust. And it's like you're eating like a pastry on like a sugar cookie on top of your apple pie. That's what
you're saying, Sarge.
Let's be clear here, okay? Right, Kratz? And I hope you agree. Politi picked a cookie. He didn't pick pie.
He didn't even pick a pie. It's going to be a message board thread later on. Politi's favorite pie is not even a pie.
Hey, Steve, you're a hero of the Rutgers fan base now.
That's going to last 20 minutes. Give me a break.
You're back. It'll be fake news next week.
We know that. Exactly. Wait until they lose to NJIT tonight. I'll be a hero for the 10, 20 seconds. All right. On that note, do we have anything? Oh, wait, a football game this week. Holy cow. I almost forget. Who are they playing again? I just know I'm not going. Thank God.
You're not going. Yeah, you lucky guy.
Oh, my Lord. Penn State. At Penn State. Yeah, that's a game that, I don't know what's the line? Anybody?
I think it was like 41.5 when it opened. I haven't tracked here. I'll pull it up right now.
41.5 sounds about right.
Pulling it up very quickly. We totally missed this last week, and I guess it's not terribly relevant, but I just feel like I have to say
You've been
something.
dying to say it. I know exactly what you're going to say. It's great. You've earned it. Go ahead, please. The floor is yours.
Chris Ash saying you left the program in a better place than you inherited it. I mean, come on, guy.
Yeah, that's it. That's all you got?
I'm not going to go into all the details, but I'm just saying,
that was rough.
Look, that was rough. Like, look, I think Chris is a very accomplished defensive coach. Would not shock me if he's a head coach somewhere, in the future. I think he'll be a top 25 program's defensive coordinator next year, or he'll be an assistant in the NFL. No ill will, but I mean, and you can't say that, yes, I think the team's culture is probably better than it was when he inherited from Flood, but you had 10 guys get arrested in 2018. Your APR has fallen. Your GSR has fallen. The team you inherited was 1 year away from beating Michigan and winning a bowl game. Now they are going to have the second longest losing streak in the history of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I will say.
After they lose to Penn State, 40-something to nothing on Saturday. So just, I know, you and your Columbus, Ohio State's down there, but
I've been envisioning him sitting on the couch with the biggest bowl of popcorn this week, though. Can you imagine? This guy must just be like, oh yeah, it was all my fault, right? Just gobbling down popcorn and watching this thing unfold. Oh my God! All right, does anybody have a prediction? You want to make a prediction, Sarge, for this game?
Okay, so I just, this will lead to my prediction, but I have to say, and Kratz alluded to it earlier, but just think about, like, we reported in the midst of all this craziness yesterday that Art Sikowski and another player, and I got news for you folks. There are going to be more, much more.
How many more?
I've heard as many as 6 or to 8. That's what I've heard. I've heard major starting caliber players.
Oh boy.
Don't want to mention names, but there's going to be more. But Art Sikowski, who was a few months removed from being basically the face of the program, as far as just being hailed as this quarterback of the future, all of a sudden started showing some progress this season, in his limited action, enters the transfer portal and it becomes almost like totally missed by people. And
yeah.
I have news for you. There are people who are very confident in his circle that he's going to end up at a FBS school. And I can't say that the same thing for the other guys who have entered the transfer portal, but there are people in the Sikowski camp who are very confident that he's going to end up at a FBS school, maybe even a Big Ten school.
Wow.
With that in mind, let me just get my prediction real quick. With all the players, jumping ship, with all the craziness, and with, quite frankly, Penn State, having, sensing blood and having a bad taste in their mouth from the loss last week, having really nothing to play for other than pride. Senior day, I think is going to be ugly, and I didn't think the Ohio State game was going to be ugly. And it really wasn't. Ohio State didn't cover that historic line. I think this is going to be ugly. If Penn State was playing for a spot in the Big Ten championship, they would try to probably take the foot off the pedal a little bit. But I think this is going to be really, really ugly. Shutout. I never predict shutouts. I don't think I've ever picked a shutout in my life. I'm going to say it's 60-0.
Oh, Kratz, you had something to say about this?
No, I just want to say that I think that it's unfortunate. Like, Art Sikowski was just a kid who I think got a really kind of raw deal from a lot of Rutgers fans.
Big time.
When he struggled last year, when he lost the job in
true freshman, ridiculous.
When kind of wrote him off for McLean Carter, like the shooting star of all shooting
always
stars.
Always handled himself with class. I mean, it just
class. Made a right decision, the red shirt. In my opinion, because it just Nunzio was given a mandate by Pat Hobbs. I think one of the all-time what-ifs in Rutgers history is if they hadn't fired McNulty. I still think Art plays this season. I think Blackshear plays this season. I think there's a chance maybe they would have been able to beat Illinois on the road, or maybe even Michigan State, given their struggles. Just random story I can throw out there because I just have never found a way. When they came down to the office on D-Day to fire John McNulty, I was told that McLean Carter was in his office, and the two of them basically walked out of the Hale Center together and never returned.
That's great. Like a West, like Sundance Kid. That's
Yeah, it was over
great.
At that point.
Love it.
I will say like 49-0, just because. Ooh. I don't think it'll be as ugly as Sarge said, just for two reasons. One, I think at Penn State, at this point, your bowl fate's kind of locked in. As long as you win, you're fine. Stay healthy. Maybe, you get some of your guys, old seniors in there, guys who've really never played. And the other thing, too, is I just think a guy like James Franklin has to realize that, we don't really know what Nunzio's future is going to hold. And, he might be, like, I would say if I had a list of, I think Nunzio will stay in college coaching. I think if he's not an assistant here, he'd be an assistant elsewhere, maybe, a coordinator at the FCS level. But I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he could, we'd go back to the high school level at some point, and James Franklin might be recruiting his kids. So
yeah, I think from what I understand, I think Nunzio is going to be I think he could be an FCS head coach. I think there could be a couple FCS jobs that that open up. In the not so, I think he's going to be an appeal to at that level. But if not, I think he could certainly be an assistant coach. I don't think he's going back to high school.
Yeah.
No, he probably isn't. But you never know if that's something that factors in a guy like Franklin's mind. So 49-0.
That's a good pick. I'm gonna go conservative because I'm tired of saying mean things. 38-3. How's that sound?
They get the Ziggy off the board.
There you go. Get the Ziggy off the board. All right, that's it. We've gone over. This is one of our best podcasts ever, which means, of course, it will not record properly. Steve Politi, James Cratch, Keith Sargent, signing off. We feel for you. We do. It's been a rough week. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thanks for listening.